How you doing today? My name is Jeremy Herron, and I would like to present to you today my presentation on technology and aging populations. I want to apologize for the beautiful background that I'm presenting in front of today. Um, for those of you that have worked with me, you know that I do a lot of work from my basement. I have kids. I can hear them running around up there right now. So this is my only form of sanctity at the moment to do this presentation. So I apologize in advance, but this is where I do my thinking. Okay, technology is a risk factor. How modern technology can be a risk factor to aging populations. The United States Census Bureau provided statistical data regarding electronic devices and internet use in the United States from 1984 to 2012. In 1984, only 8.2% of households in the United States owned a computer. That's out of the total population. Only 8% of the households in the United States own a computer. Seems like a low number. I'll elaborate. 13 years later, in 1997, only 18% of the United States households had the internet. 1997, that put me roughly in my junior year of high school. We did not have cell phones at that point or the internet. Thinking back, I was wondering how I did research and how my life was different pre-1997. I do remember that in 97 I was accessing the internet. If some of you guys remember, it was probably in the AOL format, where there was actually a little timer up on the top of your screen that let you know your internet usage to date, and you were actually charged for the minutes that you were on the internet. So I do remember that. I don't remember much before 97 in terms of how I did research. Anyway, in 2012, that number has increased to 78.9% of households that own a computer, and 94.8% of those households that did own a computer access the internet. So from 97 to 2014, we went from 18% of the United States accessing the internet to almost 80%. That's a huge jump. Now, granted, it's a 14, 15-year period, but that's still a considerable amount of people accessing the internet for research, school projects, navigation, all kinds of things. So that number is definitely climbing. In 1984, the top-of-the-line computer was the Commodore 64 that boasted 64 kilobytes of memory. That was the top-of-the-line machine in 84. You were privileged to have a machine like this. It says, today the first-generation iPhone still operates 16,000 times faster than the Commodore 64 in 1984. And this was the advertisement probably about 6 to 8 months before the iPhone came out. I do remember when the first-generation iPhone came out. It was revolutionary. So obviously today there are a large number of people that still run Apple products, and that company's evolving every day. They are not going anywhere anytime soon. So that's what we're looking at in terms of a gap between 1984's technology, to be privileged to have the Commodore 64 in your home, now to the first generation iPhone, which now we're at the iPhone 6, much more advanced technology, and it's only getting more advanced by the day. In 2012, only 14.5% of the United States population over the age of 65 used a smartphone. That is a relatively low number. That number also is climbing exponentially in terms of older adults who are using cell phones. But it's still relatively low, 14.5%. That's the only part of the population over the age of 65 who are using a smartphone. And mostly 99% of the phones available today are smartphones. I don't know if you can still get a phone that's not considered a smartphone. So still a relatively low number. Just a little add-on that I wanted to throw in here. It's stop and think where we were in 1984. These are some of the things that were happening in the world in 84. This is when AIDS was first discovered. The Apple computer releases the Macintosh personal computer. It didn't become popular yet, but it was starting to become available for in-home use. Ronald Reagan was reelected for a second term, and it said some of us were infants, some graduating college, some were already working in their careers, and some of us in the program may have not even been born at this point. At this part of my presentation, I was starting to think, like, what's my point? What's your point? What's your point? So I didn't want it to get stagnated, so I had Spider-Man assist me in saying, What is your point? What's my point? My point is that 1984 seems like forever ago to some. Like I said before, we were all in different places in 1984. I was 3 years old. However, a 70-year-old person was 40 years old in 1984 when electronic technology was only starting to become available. That's not becoming popular. It's only becoming available. So some of your more privileged people, businesses, people like that were taking advantage of this kind of technology. In 1984, there were approximately 235 million people in the United States. 8.2% of those people did own computers. That equates to approximately 18.8 million people. That's a lot of 8.2 sounds like a low number, and I was like, and when I first was researching that, I was like, man, 8.2, not a lot of people. Well, that figure still equated for 18.8, so roughly 19 million computers in the United States at that point. However, through a little bit more research, I found that there were 217 million people that did not have access to a computer. So yeah, we had about 19 million people who were using the computer, but we also had 217 million people in the United States who didn't. In 2012, there were 314 million people living in the United States, and approximately 80% of the U.S. population at that point owned a computer. That is a huge jump in the people owning computers for personal use. That being said, that means there are 251 million people in the United States that own a personal computer at home. So from 1984 to today, we went from about 18.8, let's say roughly 19 million people owning a computer at home, to 251 million people in the United States who own a personal computer. So in thinking about these numbers, a person who was born in the 1980s has been exposed to learning from a young age via electronic media for the last 30 years. We're privy to electronic terminology and functions because they've been a part of our early childhood development. Younger populations can adapt to evolving technology because it is based on a familiar foundation. We've been basically using computers since birth. They've been a part of our early childhood development. We've grown up with emerging and evolving technology. A 70-year-old was only exposed to this form of technology at the age of 40. So we have a 30-year jump on pretty much the whole baby boomer population. They were just learning this stuff. It only became available for them at the age of 40 and not popular for probably another 10 or 15 years. If you think about in terms of 1997, still only 18% of the country had the internet. So that being said, younger populations are waiting for new technology to come out. We're waiting for new cell phones. We're waiting for new computers. We're waiting for programming to become better, when aging populations are still trying to figure out the most outdated forms of technology that are available to them today. Why is this important? When first researching this topic, I was unsure about having enough content to present for 30 minutes. I was focusing on how not being tech savvy can be a risk factor to aging populations, and I kept coming up with material that basically focused on inconveniences of not using technology. So I started thinking about what some of the inconveniences of not using modern technology would be. And I came up with, like I said, some things that were inconvenient, that could make an aging person's life a little bit more difficult, so to say. No online banking, no online shopping, no electronic way of securing documents, receipts, tax information, etc. So we most likely can speak for hours to come up with scenarios on how not using technology can add an inconvenient factor to one's life. That's where I was getting hung up. These are inconvenient factors. Yes, they do make life a little bit harder for an aging individual, or any individual for that matter. But I was looking for pathologies. I was looking for more serious reasoning to why not using technology could be detrimental to your health. Then it came to me. I thought of what emotional risk factors are relevant to not using technology. And when thinking about this, I was considering what made me happy. What makes us feel connected to the world? What helps maintain feelings of self-worth and identity? And that's our social connections. I'm going to discuss how not using technology can lead to social isolation and perceived loneliness. But first, I will briefly discuss a challenge for aging populations who are trying to learn about new technology. Humans experience decline in cognitive functioning on the physiological level. The neural framework begins to deteriorate as early as the mid-20s, affecting our ability to think and reason, and is associated as a major contributing factor to forgetfulness and inability to maintain focus that can lead to dementia or Alzheimer's disease. As we age, humans experience steep age-related declines in neurotransmitter synthesis and signaling, coupled with reductions in synaptic density and plasticity. This refers to our adaptability, how we learn things, how we adapt to new situations. The lengths in our myelinated actions can also deteriorate by 50%, making the brain increasingly less efficient as we age. That's very important, thinking about the population that we're talking about and trying to teach them new technology. If you refer to the figure on the right side of the PowerPoint slide, some of you might find this familiar because this was in our midterm. This is the diagram of a neuron. The yellow section between the dendrite and the action terminal is your myelin sheath. This is how we send and perceive messages in between different neurons. So a deterioration in your myelin sheath could also contribute to a deterioration on how we send and receive information, how we learn things, how we perceive things, how we communicate. These are all major factors in terms of learning new information. So in a broader sense, the physical structure of the brain as a whole also deteriorates with age. Shrinkage and death of neurons and reductions to the number of synaptic spines and functional synapses contribute to annual reductions as much as 0.5 to 1.0% in cortical thickness. So basically that's saying that every year we age, our cerebral cortex actually gets thinner. The cerebral cortex is the outermost layer of the brain. Even in healthy individuals, aging accounts for volume variances of 37% in the thalamus, which is involved in sight, hearing, and the sleep-wake cycle. This plays a major role in mood regulation, pleasure, fear, reward, and 33% in the hippocampus, a critical site for consolidation of short-term to long-term memory. Taken together, age-related neuroanatomical changes account for an estimated 25% to 100% of the variance in cognitive ability between young and aged individuals. In other words, age-related cognitive decline occurs in tandem with physical degradation of brain structure. So even in healthy individuals, as we age, our brain structure is deteriorating. From younger populations to older populations, obviously the deterioration becomes more relevant as you age. This is important information to consider before we even approach aging populations not using modern technology. First, we need to assess these physiological factors that can pose problems with aging individuals learning to use technology. Now that we have determined that aging individuals who do not use modern technology have also experienced decline in cognitive functioning, I want to discuss how social isolation and technology are correlated. Why is social isolation a risk? Based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this discusses what humans need emotionally to function in a healthy manner. This hierarchy of needs starts at the bottom with our physiological needs: breathing, food, water, sex, sleep, homeostasis, excretion. Basically our general necessities to live. Then it goes to safety, security of body, of employment, of resources, mortality in the family. More materialistic things. This is more of the fruits of our physical labor on a material level. Then we go to love and belonging, friendship, family, sexual intimacy, things like that make us feel connected. Esteem, which makes us see how we view ourselves. This is very important. How we view ourselves or how we perceive our life to be. And I'll elaborate on how we perceive our life, how that is really correlated to our social, emotional, and physical health. And then we get to the top of the scale, which is self-actualization. This is morality, creativity, being spontaneous, problem-solving skills, lack of prejudice, and accepting of the facts. This is basically how we view our life. And to the aging population, I'm going to also elaborate on how that's important, how aging individuals do self-actualize their situation, and how that is a very important factor in determining whether they are physically healthy. So I'm going to make the connection between your self-actualization on how you perceive your life and how that dictates your physical health.